Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we got another news and rumor video to discuss. We're looking at some signings from our past couple of days, a Caps GM change, and we've also got some trade rumors involving the Jets, the Kings, the Ducks, the Canadiens, and the Blue Jackets. So there's all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Internet Hockey Channel. Before going to this video, don't forget to like this video, subscribe down below, thank you for your support. We're nearly to love you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below, and hopefully leave a comment down in the comment section below so you can also listen to today's video. Now, in today's video, we're going to do a quick recap here of all the signs that happened from Saturday, July 6th, all the way out to yesterday on June 8th, so we'll get to all those here. So first, on July 6th, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 signings. Most of them were ELCs. The Winnipeg Jets extended some of their RFAs. David Gustafsson, who's a left winger / center, gets a 2-year extension with an AAV of $835,000 that we're going to start next year. Saul Baumtick's forward, so it's a big pickup there for the Jets. And then Logan Stanley, who's another RFA, gets a 2-year deal with an AAV of $1.25 million. So it's a little bit of a variable contract. We know that Stanley had a request to a trade a couple of years ago, never got it. So he's going to be with the Jets for the next couple of years. And I think after that contract's done, he'll be a UFA. So interesting move there for the Jets, but Stanley's going to be with the team for the next couple of years, so solid pickup there for the Jets. And then we saw some ELCs. The Washington Capitals gave out 2 ELCs. One was to Ilya Protas, who I think is related to Alexei Protas, who's already with the Capitals. He gets a 3-year ELC with AAV of $889,000. I think he was a 3rd-round pick in this past year's draft, if I'm correct. So it's a pretty good pickup there for the Caps. They also signed a 2023 5th-round pick in Cameron Allen, who's a pretty good defensive prospect. He gets a 3-year ELC with an AAV of $886,000 that we're going to start next year, so it's pretty good. And then 3 first-round picks from this past year's draft all signed their ELCs, including the 1st and 2nd overall picks. Now, both Celebrini and Levshunov were potentially going to go to college, but Celebrini sent a 3-year ELC with the Sharks, and Levshunov his 3-year ELC with the Hawks. Both got $975,000 AAV deals on their ELCs. Pretty good deals there for the Hawks and the Sharks. Celebrini will definitely be a top 6 center at the NHL level this year. Levshunov may play at the AHL level. The Blackhawks may not try and rush him, but I definitely think at some points we may see Levshunov at the NHL level. So I could see these same sort of situations like a Nemec from last year, where he starts over in the AHL, works out really well, and then if they run into some injuries or if he's playing really well, he'll be called up. So pretty good pickups there for the Hawks and the Sharks. Then the 13th overall pick in this past year's draft, Jet Luchanko, signs a 3-year ELC with the Flyers, also 3 years, $975,000. Pretty good prospect there for the Flyers. It was a little bit of a reach there at number 13 overall, but I think still after a couple of years of development time, he should be a fantastic player there for the Flyers. So interesting pickup there for Philly. Going over to the signings that happened on July 7th, there were only 4. First, the Carolina Hurricanes sent brother of Jacob Slavin, Hosea Slavin, to a 2-year deal with an AAV of $775,000. Should be an AHL player, potential call-up option, really good center prospect, has gotten some NHL experience, but still it's a pretty good pickup there for the Hurricanes. The Blue Jackets signed Zach Shachenko. Shachenko gets a 1-year league minimum deal. Should be a 3rd stringer there in Columbus next year, so pretty good pickup there for Columbus. The Philadelphia Flyers extend RFA defenseman Igor Zamula. Zamula gets a 2-year deal with an AAV of $1.7 million. Should be a solid 3rd pair of defensemen next year, so pretty good pickup there for Philly. And the Utah franchise signs RFA forward Curtis Douglas. Douglas gets a 2-year deal with an AAV of league minimum. He should be once again an AHL forward, so it's a pretty good pickup there for the Utah franchise. Then Barrett Hayton winds up signing an extension, 2-year deal, $2.65 million deal. Pretty good pickup there for the Utah franchise. Hayton should be a solid 2nd, 3rd line player for the Utah franchise this upcoming season, so it's a pretty good pickup there for Utah. Raphael Lavoie, who was also a RFA, gets a 1-year league minimum deal with Edmonton. Should be a call-up option, or potentially could even be a 4th line forward there for Edmonton this year, so that's a pretty good pickup there for the Oilers to get Lavoie. Then you also have the Buffalo Sabres, who signed one of their 1st-round picks in this past year's draft, 14th overall in the 2024 draft, which was Constant Helenius. Helenius gets a 3-year ELC with AAV of $975,000. Pretty good pickup there for the Sabres to get Helenius signed for the next couple of years. And then we also saw the Avalanche give an ELC to a 1st-round pick from last year, 2023 1st-round pick, 27th overall, Kaliyev Ritchie, who has been pretty good, I think, over in the OHL. He gets a 3-year ELC with AAV of $950,000 that we're going to start next year. So pretty good pickups there for some of these teams. I mean, good to see some of the more 2024 1st-round picks get ELCs like Helenius, Celebrini, Levshunov, Luchanko. Also good to see other guys get ELCs like Allen, like Ritchie, like a couple of these other guys. And good to see some of these RFAs like Lavoie in Edmonton, Hayton in Utah, Zamula in Philadelphia, and Stanley in Winnipeg all get new deals. So interesting signs there from over the past couple of days. There's been no trades at this this point in time, so no trades to talk about at this point. We also have a change in the Caps GM position. I'm not sure if we talked about this in our last video or not, but the Capitals did wind up making a GM change. Brian McLellan's still the president of the team, so no surprises there, but he has stepped down from the GM role and he's given it to Chris Patrick. Patrick has been in the Cap system for quite some time now. From 2016 to 2023, he was director of player personnel. From 2021 to 2023, he was the assistant GM. From August 28th, 2023 to July 8th this year, he was associate GM, and now he's the new GM. So probably had a lot of say in some of the moves they've already made this year, and they could still make some more moves. So interesting stuff there at this point, but that's a pretty good pickup there for the Caps to promote Chris Patrick to full-time GM. So that's a pretty good pickup there for the Caps. And as much as McLellan's still the president, I think that he'll still have some say in what happens with the Caps roster. So interesting stuff there, but the Caps have made a GM change, and Chris Patrick is now the new GM of the Washington Capitals. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. Now we're going to talk about some more trade rumors here today. First, we'll start over here with the Montreal Canadiens on our trade thing first. According to Lyle Richardson of the Bleacher Report, he said that the Canadiens, after really not hitting on any sort of big targets on the free agent market, are most likely going to go explore the free agent room and still make one more significant move before the season begins. We know that the Canadiens, the last couple of years, have taken big swings to get some young players. 2 years ago, they made a big swing acquiring Kirby Dach. Last year, it was Alex Newhook. They were expecting someone to be acquired this year at the draft, but the Canadiens were relatively quiet at the draft. And then on free agency day, they were also extremely quiet, only extending Yaroslav an 8-year extension and signing Berbule. So the Canadiens have been extremely quiet so far up to this point, so that leads a lot of people to believe that they may still make one significant move. Now, according to Lyle Richardson, some potential options here that they could try and target are Trevor Zegras and Martin Necas. Necas is still a guy who could be moved. He's an RFA. He's currently a player who's scheduled for ARB rates, so if the Canadiens are going to move him, they're going to have to move him probably before that happens. That's a pretty good pickup there for the Canadiens if they were to get Necas. They've been linked to Zegras for quite some time now, so I wouldn't be overly surprised if they tried to go after Zegras. They still have a plethora of blue liners. I know they moved on from Kovacevic, but they still have guys like Goulet, Mailloux, Reinbacher, Hudson, Xhekaj, Baron, Harris, Struble. I mean, they have so many defensemen. Not all of them are going to make the NHL roster, so at this point, I think there's still a possibility we could see one of them get moved. More likely it's Harris or Struble, but there's a possibility if it was to get one of those big guys, I think they could wind up moving a guy like Xhekaj or maybe even Goulet. So that's a possibility. We know they still want to move on for maybe one or two more of their veterans. There's been some talk about the Dvorak. There's been some talk about Armia. There's been some talk about Anderson and Gallagher. So if they were able to make some sort of a move with the Hurricanes or Ducks in order for one of these players, could one of those guys to be on the move out, maybe just make the cap work, that could be a possibility. I'm not sure what other players could be involved here. The Canadiens still have a lot of really good prospects. They still have some pretty good picks over the next couple of years, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Habs, but we know that they were looking to move on for some of their veterans, looking to move off and solve the defensive player, and looking to try and get some upgrade up front, and they haven't done that yet, and according to Lyle Richardson, they may still do that before the season starts, so we'll have to wait and see on that, but the Canadiens may still be a team who makes a big swing at some point. Going over to the Winnipeg Jets, according to Stefan Rosner of The Athletic, he says that the Carolina Hurricanes a couple days ago were making a big push to try and acquire Nikolai Ehlers from the Winnipeg Jets. We talked about this in one of our recent videos, but that could be a really good move there if the Jets could wind up moving Ehlers to Carolina. There's been some talk about Necas going the other way. Maybe it's not Necas, maybe it's someone else. We know the Winnipeg Jets are looking for a solid young defensive prospect to sort of come into their system, sort of help replace the loss of some of their other guys like a Brendan Dillon or things. So could they try and make a deal where they acquire a guy like, I don't know, maybe a guy like Morrow or someone else on that blue line who's a little bit of a younger defenseman? Possibility, I think it is. Could they try and acquire an agent to try and replace Ehlers? I think that's a possibility as well. So we'll have to wait and see. But Rosner does say that the Hurricanes are making some sort of a push for Ehlers. That was a couple days ago. He also mentioned that the Islanders did have interest and could still have interest even after adding Duclair. I mean, if Ehlers were to go to New York, you would think that they would be trying to target a guy like Brian Pullock or something like that. That could be a really good pickup there for the Jets if they were able to make it work. It might have to take a little bit more than Nikolai Ehlers, but adding a guy like Ryan Pullock or maybe even an Adam Pelech to that blue line would be a very fantastic thing there for the Jets, or maybe even a guy like Alex Romanov. So it'll be interesting to see, but according to Stefan Rosner, Hurricanes have upped their offers for Nikolai Ehlers, and they're really making a strong push to try and acquire him. On top of that, the Islanders may still have some interest, and maybe a team who lurks in the wings at the Carolina Hurricanes can try and pull off a deal for Ehlers. So it'll be interesting to see, but it definitely does sound like Ehlers' name is out there, and there's a very likely chance to get dealt at some point, so we'll have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on Nikolai Ehlers, as with the Jets still trying to make some moves, it might make a ton of sense for that team to try and move on from Ehlers. Next, going over to the Columbus Blue Jackets, according to some recent reports, there's still some talk about Patrik Laine potentially being moved. Now, the situation's really complicated right now, with Laine potentially still being in the Players Assistance Program, so that might have been what's holding up a trade right now, plus his contract. But at this point, it still seems like the Jackets and Laine really want to try and get a fresh start. Some people do think it's a possibility that they may have to start the season with Laine on the roster, have him up his value, show that his shoulder's better, show that he's recovered from the Players Assistance Program, and then maybe move him at some point in season, maybe towards the trade deadline, where he's only got 1.5 years left on his contract. That's a possibility, but there's still some people out there who think he could be dealt. Pierre LeBrun does think that the Jackets are still considering mutually parting ways with Laine via a trade of some sorts. Now, it is a difficult trade with a lot of teams now having not too much cap space. Moving Laine is going to be difficult. He's got an $8.7 million cap hit for this year plus next year, so it'll be a really difficult trade. Some people do think that the Jackets may be willing to retain maybe $4.35 million of his cap hit, 50% of it, so I think there's a possibility that could maybe facilitate a trade to make it work even better, but we'll have to wait and see. I mean, Laine is a really good player, former 40 goal scorer from his time in Winnipeg, but his time in Columbus he has not been overly good, so I can see why some teams might not want to try and acquire him. Teams who have been linked to him that I've seen over the past while, one in Seattle, Elliot Freeman mentioned this a while ago, I've seen a couple of other people say it as well. Even after adding Stevenson, they could definitely use a guy like Laine. He's got a couple of years left on his deal. Maybe they move a guy who maybe would be a little lower on the lineup, like a Schwartz or a Tanev, in order to acquire a guy like Patrik Laine, and maybe some other pieces as well. They have a lot of really good prospects, so I do think there could be a deal to be had there. Another team I've heard recently is the Minnesota Wild, adding him to a team that could definitely use someone like a second line. I think it definitely would be worthwhile. Now, once again, they would have to potentially have the Jackets eat some cap, on top of potentially having to move off a contract. Not sure who they would consider moving, but definitely they also have a lot of really good draft prospects too, plus a couple of decent picks, so I could see the Wild and Kraken have some interest in Laine. There are probably a couple of other teams out there too, but until the Players Assistance Program thing is figured out and teams are comfortable with acquiring him, we probably won't get a Patrik Laine deal, so interesting stuff there at this point, but it does sound like Laine at this point may not be moved until the start of the season, but if he was, teams like the Kraken or Wild could have some major interest, so we'll have to wait and see on that. Going over to Trevor Zegras, I've seen a couple of reports on Twitter, can't guarantee any of these sources or anything, so it might just be speculation, but saying that Zegras' name is still out there, and even according to fourthperiod.com, there's still about 5 to 8 teams who have some major interest in Zegras, so there's still a possibility. I think we could see a Zegras trade at some point this offseason. Some of the bigger names who I've seen be linked not only on Twitter but by the fourthperiod.com would be Buffalo and New York. The Rangers did not do very much in free agency. They're still looking to try and move on from Trouba. They're still potentially looking to move on from Kakko, so could be a deal to be had there trying to acquire Trevor Zegras from Anaheim, which is a possibility. There's also been some talk about Buffalo. They haven't really made a huge splash at this point. They recently moved on from Matthew Savoy, which a lot of Sabres fans didn't like. So could they try and make a move to acquire Trevor Zegras? I think it's definitely a possibility, so we'll have to wait and see. Other teams through the 4-3.com link will be Chicago, who could use another top 6 forward, Boston, who could try and replace Jake DeBrusk with Zegras, Calgary, who has a plethora of cap space and could try and get younger, Nashville, who already adds a lot of really good pieces this year, could try and add some more, Montreal and Philly, who have been linked to him quite a bit over the past little while. Montreal is the big splash. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Philadelphia, given the fact his best friend Jamie Drysdale's trade there a little while ago, so interesting stuff there, but it seems like Zegras might be the guy who ends up getting moved in the not-too-distant future, and we could still see a Zegras trade at some point before the season starts, so we'll have to wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to Arthur Kaliyev. Kaliyev, according to fourthperiod.com, has been linked to 5 teams, 3 of them in the Atlantic and 2 of them in the West. The 2 Western teams are Dallas and San Jose. For the Stars, I mean, they could use another bottom 6 forward. They lost a guy like Craig Smith, Ty Dellandrea. They could use some more bottom 6 help, so I can see what they would have some interest in Kaliyev. San Jose is still a young team looking to try and fill some holes in their forward group. I think they could definitely have an interest in Kaliyev. Montreal, this is not the big upgrade we talked about, but I have seen Montreal be linked to Kaliyev a little bit over the past little while, and I could see them have some interest. I've also seen Ottawa be interested. That he could be a really good third liner on a team like the Ottawa Senators, so I think it would be a pretty good pickup there for the Sens. The Buffalo Sabres, we know we just talked about, they haven't made a huge splash yet. Could they use the Kaliyev to try and improve their forward group? I think it's a possibility, so we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there, but according to a lot of reports, Kaliyev could be a guy who ends up getting moved. We know he does want to go back to LA. He's an RFA right now, and at some point or during the offseason, I think we will see a Kaliyev trade of some sort. So that's what I'm going to talk about for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all of this down in the comment section below. What do you think about Kaliyev? Does he get moved? Is it to one of those 5 teams? Does Zegras get moved at some point before the season starts? If so, could it be to any of those teams we mentioned? Do we see a Laine trade before the season starts? Could it be to Minnesota or Seattle? Or is it more likely that's an in-season trade? Could we see Ehlers be moved in the not distant future? If so, could Carolina or NYI be an interested team who could wind up landing him? And what do you think about the Canadiens? Do they move on from one of their veteran forwards? Do they move on from one of their young blue liners? And if so, could they go after a guy like Zegras or Necas? Definitely. If you guys thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. So I'm going to talk for today. I'm going to tell you this video. If you liked it, subscribe down below. Thank you for your support. We're nearly to love you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't leave a comment down in the comment section below. So I'll discuss today's video. Also a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis. If I don't, so check that out. I'll leave a link in the description below. And kind of see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.